It was a huge weekend for the University of Louisville football program on the recruiting trail as the Cardinals picked up 5 commitments. We'll talk about what happened over the past couple days on this episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Stay tuned.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome into this bonus episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. I want to take this time to personally thank you once again for making us your first listen of the day. And just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services, including YouTube, 5 days a week, your team every day. It was a monumental weekend for the University of Louisville football program on the recruiting trail. They came into the weekend hosting a plethora of top talent from across the country, multiple, 3 stars and 4 stars. And then, by Sunday evening, the program had picked up 5 commitments. It started with quarterback Pierce Clarkson, a big quarterback target committed on Friday morning. And then the program had 4 defensive back commitments on Sunday. Jeremiah Caldwell, Jayden Williams, and Antonio Watts. We'll talk about what each of their recruitments mean for the Cardinals. Before we get into the content of today's show, like I mentioned, for those who are not aware of who I am, my name is Dalton Pence. I'm a credential media member for Cardinal Sports Zone and also do some PA and AS work for the university in various sports. You can check out my personal Twitter in the graphic in the bottom left-hand of your screen. And the podcast Twitter page is at @LO_Louisville. So let's get right on into the show. The big news from the huge monumental recruiting weekend started on Friday morning before a lot of the recruits had even gotten into town. Pierce Clarkson, the high 4-star quarterback prospect that many Louisville fans had targeted as the number 1 prospect in the class on their big board, on their respective Louisville wish list. Committed to the Cardinals. It was a huge commitment. Over 13 billboards were placed by the Clarkson family in the Derby City, most notably the one at Lynn Stadium. And the recruiting video that was narrated by Heisman Trophy winner Bryce Young, former St. John Bosco quarterback DJ Uagale, I forget how to pronounce his name, Clemson wide receiver Bo Collins, Lamar Jackson had, I believe, a placement in there. But overall, a huge commitment for the University of Louisville. A Teddy Bridgewater type of commitment, if I might add. We'll talk about that here in just a second. I want to talk about Pierce as a football prospect. 6 foot, 195 pounds as he's listed on 24/7 Sports. Had a handful of very, very solid offers. Kentucky, Michigan State, Mississippi, Oregon, Pittsburgh, Purdue, Virginia Tech, etc. As a prospect, ranked currently as the number 111th best prospect in the 2023 class, the 10th best quarterback. Like I mentioned, he comes from St. John Bosco, a national powerhouse out in Southern California. What some people will argue is, hey, look, he hasn't really played all that, he hasn't necessarily started a full season. I I see where the concerns lie there, but ultimately, from watching film, from watching what I've seen from him, I think he's a gamer. He's a program-changing recruit. Obviously, he's going to have to show that at the collegiate level. But, in terms of, prospect analysis and stuff like that, I want to read you what I believe somebody had said. I can't find it. But regardless, a couple things that I'm very, very impressed with when I watch from him is, number one, his control when he's scrambling. I think that he remains poised, whether or not he's outside of the pocket, running with his legs. Reminds me a lot of Teddy in that sense, and maybe not necessarily a dual threat quarterback, but still can make things happen with his legs. Always plants his feet before he throws. I think that that's a huge thing. He has a rocket for an arm, solid arm strength. I'm impressed with his accuracy. Obviously, sample size is kind of one of the main concerns. He's not necessarily the biggest guy just at 6 foot, but I think, what he brings to the table in terms of athleticism, in terms of arm strength, accuracy, the mental intangibles, the footwork, I think that that's really where, you see a lot of, that technique. I think his technique is very, I like, just the overall mechanic side of things. But most of the concern with Clarkson just lies with the lack of sample size and the fact that he hasn't started, a full season. But ultimately, I think that, he's going to, prove himself in his senior season and kind of alleviate some of those doubts. And I mentioned, when you take a step back, the Pierce Clarkson effect is in full ride now. It kind of reminds me of Teddy Bridgewater in the 2011 class. Is when Pierce committed a lot, or when Pierce started showing interest, a lot of his teammates, high 4-star guys, some of his friends that are 4-stars, top talent wants to play with top talent. We see that all over the country in all of the top programs. Pierce Clarkson committing, I feel like, potentially changes the trajectory of this 2023 recruiting class, which is a huge one for Scott Satterfield. Scott Satterfield, by commitment ranking, the 2022 class was one of the best, per recruit rankings, in the past 20 years for Louisville. But it was the fact that there are only 13 commits. Now, the fact that you're probably going to take 25 in this class coming up, I haven't heard otherwise. But being able to, start it out with Pierce Clarkson, a top 120 recruit in the country, that's just huge. The fact that he's able to see a bright future for, a possible, in the NIL realm. That's kind of a tongue twister, NIL realm. But I digress. I think that it's a huge addition for multiple reasons. Number one, Malik Cunningham is gone after this next year, and the Cardinals, I don't believe, have their quarterback of the future on the roster. So that is the number one key. But also, like I said, it changes the trajectory. All these top guys are looking at Louisville now. He brought a lot of them from St. John Bosco, R.J. Jones, Jayshon Frosto Ramos, Jaleel McClain into the university this week. I think he brought McClain, but regardless, he's a teammate. And Jonte Cook, one of his good friends, that's a top 50 top 50 recruit, top wide receiver in the country. So I think that it really opens up a lot of the possibility. And look what happens. I mean, they get 4 defensive back commits on Sunday. Now, obviously, I think that not all of those are from, hey, look, Pierce committed, so we're going to commit. But I do think you're going to see some of those benefits. Having a top recruiter in the class. Just so happens to be one of the best, quarterbacks in the class. I think that could overall turn some heads, get some guys to join. It's one of those things that we'll see how it plays out toward National Signing Day. But from where we sit right now, I got to be honest. I think that this class has the potential to end up being a top 20 class in the 2023 recruiting cycle. And it's like Teddy Bridgewater, the 2011 class, Bridgewater commits, and there's a lot of other guys from that area in South Florida that commit, and the Cardinals have a very solid class as they head into, actually, hold on, 2011. Was it 2011? Yeah, it was. Regardless, I'm trying to think. I'm losing my train of thought. But you see what I'm saying. The fact that you can add a top quarterback into this class, bodes well for recruiting in the future. You see, him, interacting with guys, getting guys on board. There's 3 commitments in the 2023 class now. All of them are ranked in the top 500 in the 24/7 Sports recruiting rankings. If Adonijah Green is not in the top 500, he's right outside of the top 500. And I think that this is an overall good start to a solid recruiting class coming along. So the Pierce Clarkson effect is in full swing. We'll see how that can pan out for the Cards as the next couple of weeks go on, and how the program starts inching toward the spring game. I want to transition now into another 2023 commit that made his pledge over the weekend on Sunday afternoon. That is local Louisville Male High School standout Jeremiah Collins. We'll talk about why that recruitment and commitment is very pivotal for the Cards moving forward after we talk about our friends at GetUpside. Hey Cards fans, this is your host Dalton Pence with an incredible app everyone who buys gas needs to know about. GetUpside. My listeners are earning cash back for every gallon of gas every time they fill up. Just download the free GetUpside app in the App Store or Google Play right now and use the promo code SCORE for 25 cents per gallon or more off on your first fill-up. Cash back. Some people who drive a lot are making as much as $200 to $300 a year in cash back, and there's no catch. The cash back gets added right back to your account. You can cash out anytime to your bank account, PayPal, e-gift card for Amazon, or other brands. Just download the free GetUpside app and use the promo code SCORE to get 25 cents per gallon or more cash back on your first tank. On Sunday, the Cardinals added the third member to the 2023 class. That is local Mill High School standout Jeremiah Collins. The 3-star recruit is ranked as a top 400 prospect in the 2023 cycle. Right now plays mainly at cornerback, but what we'll mention is the fact that he can also play safety, and that versatility is something that I think we're starting to see trend-wise in the way that Scott Satterfield, Brian Brown, and company recruit defense and defensive backs. But ultimately, this is a huge commitment. Number one, you're adding another local standout into your program. Now, obviously, with all of these prospects, you have to get them to signing day. But getting another local guy to commit, in albeit a top 400 guy, is huge. Male high school, I made a tweet out, Louisville right now has Selah Brown, Caleb Glenn, and Jeremiah Collins. It seems that Mail to Louisville pipeline is starting to get rebuilt, and that's something that is very pivotal. As a player, or as a person who knows, is familiar with the Louisville High School football program, which is one of the top in the state, there's a lot of talent coming out of that Bulldog program here in the next couple years, and it's pivotal to get the top standouts every year. You got Selah Brown in the 2022 class. You got Jeremiah Collins in 2023. It's yet to be determined if Woo Spencer, the top defensive lineman from Mail, it's the offensive lineman. Lyman, put it that way. I feel like I'm getting commitments, or I'm getting prospects mixed up, getting it mixed up a little bit with St. X's Micah Carter. But overall, Woo Spencer has been revered as a Kentucky lean. We'll see how that can see if Louisville can make up any ground with him. But overall, a huge commitment. We talk about Louisville wanting to build a fence around the Derby City, around the 502, and get the city's top standouts to come to the Cardinal program, just considering that, once you get outside of Louisville, it's hard to convince players from outside in the state to come to Louisville and not the program down the road. So that's why it's so pivotal to get guys from the 502, and I think that's something that the Cardinal program has done very well and made a staple of theirs over the past 20 to 25 years. But ultimately, as key as this is in a local sense, it's probably even more important when you look at positional need. After next year, they're adding 3 guys to the defensive back room that they all committed on Sunday. We'll talk about those 3 in the next segment. But there is going to be some depth issues at the end of this next season. Kentrell Clark probably going to the NFL. Chandler Jones will likely be gone as well. There's multiple guys that, you take those guys out, and outside of there, you still need to add numbers. Jeremiah Collins, defensive back, bringing that versatility, I think, is key for this program, because it's all hands on deck. I wouldn't be surprised if the 2023 cycle they add in a good amount of defensive backs. One thing that Jeremiah does really well, when you watch him on film, is I think that he's very versatile, and that's what I meant by that trend. You see guys all across the board. Derek Edwards in the 2021 class, played both cornerback and safety at the high school level. Rance Connor, I feel like did that a little bit as well. And it's kind of where we're seeing Chandler Jones, kind of going back and forth. That's where I feel like we're starting to see a little bit of a trend is, Brian Brown getting that versatility. And that's one thing that once he came into, the Cardinal program as the defensive coordinator, was like, we want to have guys that can make plays all over the field. Now, whether that be safety, cornerback, linebacker hybrid, we'll see how that works with the Cardinals seemingly switching to a 4-3 defense. And how the role of the linebackers will switch up. But I love Collins' versatility. I think that he is very solid in the slot with very kind of underrated lateral foot speed. He's 6'2", 170. He's added about 20 pounds since about this time last year, I believe. He still needs to add some weight as he goes into college, but I do think that with Ben Souders and that strength and conditioning program, we're going to see him get his body right. He has very good ball skills. Does a very good job high pointing the football with his 6'2" size. So that verticality really is something that you can work with. And the fact of the matter is, I think that he's just a very fundamentally sound football player. I know that the Louisville High School football coaching staff really speaks highly of him, and he's one of those players that I think at the end of the day could possess CB1 potential with his size, with his ability to cover, whether that be in man or even in zone packages and stuff like that. I think that this is a huge commitment. When you look at his offer sheet, it's not the most appealing offer sheet. I think that Collins is a guy that would have benefited had COVID really not run rampant in 2020 and for the most part 2021. I feel like his recruitment is really starting to pick up. Over the last handful of months. He camped back in Louisville. I believe it was in July, and earned that Louisville offer in July. They loved what they saw from him at camp. Overall, he's got a Kentucky offer, Purdue, Virginia Tech, Vanderbilt, West Virginia, Illinois, etc. So still has some respectable Power 5 offers and stuff like that. But like I mentioned, for a handful of reasons, this is a very big commitment. Number one, it gets you another local hometown guy, because once you start creating that pipeline, you get Selah Brown, and then you turn around and you get Jeremiah Collins, and you never know the effect it might have on some of their friends. Top recruits want to go play with top recruits. Jeremiah Collins ranked as a top 400 guy right now. I think that as he adds more weight, as he he's able to shine in camps and stuff like that. I think one thing, I'm not necessarily saying that it hurts Male, but I think that it hurts his stock. But I think the fact that Male's defense is so overall sound and how good they are as a unit, I think that, some of the, I'm not saying, he doesn't get the credit he deserves, but I think he would be there. You see what I'm trying to say? Like, they just have a good amount of guys that get a lot of recognition. Selah Brown, Wu Spencer. I think that Jeremiah Collins is also in that type of caliber recruit. So I think that this is a huge commitment from a local perspective, from a positional perspective, because you get a top 30 to, I think, top 35 defensive back in the country, can play cornerback or safety. So to me, it's a huge commitment for the Cardinals. I'm very excited for him. Very, very, very good guy. I mean, he's always been one of those guys that there's a feature that I have for Cardinal Sports Zone that was out in early August or late July. I think if you go back and look at it, the way he speaks about Louisville, the way that he sees his possible fit here, he wants to help us get back on the map. And I think that this is a huge commitment. So we'll continue to talk about the 2023 class when we get more news. But the majority of the news on Sunday came from the 2022 class. 3 commitments, 2 high school guys and 1 transfer. We'll talk about what those guys bring to the table and what it means for the Louisville defensive backs department in next year's setting. We'll talk about that after we talk about our friends at Built Bar. It's the new year, so that means New Year's resolutions. If yours is about getting fit or eating healthier, you need to make sure you include Built Bar in that plan. It's the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, or maybe even better. It makes it easier to stick to that resolution, because look, I mean, we're January 31st. A lot of people out there are starting to falter in terms of their commitment. It's getting a little shaky. It gets boring. Sometimes protein bars are plain hard to choke down, waxy, chalky, etc. But a Built Bar is covered in 100% real chocolate on top of the creamy goodness, the tastiness. It's extremely healthy. And even if you're not a huge fan of working out, you can at least eat something that tastes good and it's good for you. That way, when you eat a delicious Built Bar, you can almost count it as a workout. Do yourself a favor. Go to Built.com and use the promo code LOCKED15 and you'll get 15% off your order. Once again, that's use the promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. On Sunday, like I mentioned, there were 4 defensive back commits, and that's an incredible feat. I'm never sure that I've seen 4 commits to a program in one day, let alone 4 of essentially the same position in the secondary. It started with 4-star defensive back from Belleville, Michigan. That's Jeremiah Caldwell, former University of Kentucky commit who decommitted from the Wildcat program back in August. A huge, pretty solid, offer list. Has the offer from Kentucky, has a Tennessee offer, Michigan State, Michigan, etc. So there's a handful of top programs that are around him. 6'2", 177 pounds listed on his profile. Top 400 guy in the country. One thing that I really like when I watch his frame, I think that he's probably the most, has the highest ceiling of the 3 that are in the 2022 class that are coming in. I really kind of reminds me a lot of like a James Sample type, for Louisville fans that remember him, in the 2013 to 15 range. I really like the fact that he is such an extremely good tackler in the open field. Kind of packs a punch with his ferocious hitting ability. Think like Jalen Alderman in the 2021 class, in the fact that when he is presented with the opportunity for a tackle, he rarely ever misses it. Does a very good job with his strength, has a lot of good technique in terms of tackling as well. Very solid in terms of coverage. At 6'2", he's one of those guys that plays receiver as well, so he's got good hands, does a good job of high pointing the football. Has deceptive speed for his 6'2" frame. It seems like, Scott Satterfield and company are recruiting, bigger defensive backs. I like that trend. And Jeremiah Caldwell is a guy that, could be like a Kanai Walker who transferred to Oklahoma, from the 2021 class. I think you could see him play some meaningful snaps next season. I don't necessarily think that he starts because you have, Catrell Clark, Trey Franklin, Chandler Jones, etc. But I do think Caldwell is a guy that you could stick into the rotation next year. I like the things that he brings to the table. And the second commitment of the day came from Columbus, Georgia safety Antonio Watts, who is ranked as a 2-star on Rivals. He's unranked on 24/7 Sports. On his 24/7 Sports profile, he only has 2 Power 5 offers. That is Syracuse and that is Louisville. When I watched the film, with his 6'1", 185-pound frame, from that talent hotbed down in Georgia, I'm not one that always says, look, every guy that Louisville gets that isn't necessarily ranked as high is a diamond in the rough, because we know that that's not the case. But when I watch his film, I do question as to why he isn't necessarily ranked as high. I like the fact, I think he's very solid in coverage, has good instincts in the, the defensive backfield, very solid in terms of, being able to cover opposing slot receivers, tight ends, and, being able to be the ball hawk in the, the very back of the secondary. Kind of one of those guys, like a football magnet, has a ton of interceptions to show from last season. I'm not necessarily sure how much he's going to produce next season, considering that Kendrick Duncan is back. You have MJ Griffin coming in, Josh Minkins. Hey, even you could possibly see a guy like Jeremiah Caldwell possibly used in the safety department as well. So I think he's a player, kind of one of those to where let Wes McGriff, let Brian Brown, Greg Gasparotto develop him for 2023, and if he gives you some stuff in 2022, that's big as well. I think this is one of those things that they like what they've seen on tape, they like what they've seen in person, and it's kind of one of those things where Scott Satterfield and company are taking a chance on a guy from a very talented area and possible diamond in the rough type player. So we'll see how much Antonio Watts is able to is able to produce next season, but I think he's kind of a play for the future. Jayden Williams, the transfer from USC, not South Carolina, Southern California. He was the last commitment of the afternoon. The 3-year letterman for the Trojans, played 2019 to 2021. Overall, had I think in 3 seasons, only had 15 tackles, had 1 interception, no sacks, no forced fumbles, no pass deflections. I've seen some Cardinal fans be like, well, what's the realistic outlook for Williams? Well, I do think that, from watching film, 6'1", 195 pounds, was a player that saw more action this past season. So that's a little bit, that's a little bit encouraging, in the grand scheme of things. I think he's going to be a depth piece at cornerback for the Cards. For Louisville, losing Kenai Walker, losing Greedy Vance, it was evident that Louisville just needed bodies in that room, and they got it. They've got Antonio Watts, they've got Jeremiah Caldwell. They also, got Jayden Williams, a guy who's played in college for 3 years, so maybe a little bit more ready to step in right away and kind of be a depth piece. I think that you're going to see him, second string, possibly third string, really just kind of depending on where they, utilize him playing. But ultimately, I think he's got, with the COVID year, he probably has 2 years of eligibility, whether he uses that or not. But I think that it's a solid depth piece. Him and I don't think we're expecting any of these 3 guys to come in right away and contend for starting reps or anything like that. But adding 3 guys to a secondary that truly lacked depth, I think that's what you can ask for Scott Satterfield. So he might not necessarily be done addressing the secondary. We know that there's more scholarships to work with, but overall, it's one of, if not the best, football recruiting weekend in Louisville football program history. 5 commitments in a span of 3 days. One of those being a possible program changing, top 120 ranked recruit Pierce Clarkson at quarterback, and then on Sunday you got 2 top 400 players, a transfer defensive back, and seeming a 2-star defensive back as well. So people will holler about, oh well, it's not the greatest quality. Well, I mean, you got a signal caller who's a top 10 quarterback in America in terms of the 2023 cycle. You got a 4-star 2022 guy, you got a top 400 2023 guy, and then you got a transfer and a 2-star for depth for this upcoming season. I think it was a very successful weekend. Hopefully that this recruiting momentum can continue to trend upward as we approach the football spring games. So we'll continue to talk recruiting as much as we can whenever we get the news. But talked about Pierce Clarkson, talked about Jeremiah Caldwell, Antonio Watts, Jayden Williams. A couple quick shout-outs first to the Cardinal Sports Zone podcast. The most recent episode dropped yesterday. You can check that out at cardinalsportszone.com. Also, the Locked On Bets podcast hosted by your boy Q with handicapping expert analysis from Lee Sterling. You can get that on the Odyssey app or wherever you like to get your podcast. That's going to wrap up this Monday edition, this bonus edition of the Monday edition of the show. Tomorrow is the 6th-month anniversary of the launching of the Locked On Louisville podcast. So definitely be sure. Not tomorrow, Wednesday. I'm losing my days. I can't even tell you. But overall, very, very appreciative for everyone who's liking, sharing, subscribing, rating the podcast on whatever service that they use. That's going to wrap up this edition of the show. Everyone have a great day, and we will see you right back here.